To be honest, I'm pretty surprised that I have anything to talk about in this video, so I'm quite happy with the stack that I have ready to talk about today. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today, and today's video is my monthly wrap up. So it is a wrap up for the month of May, which has been a weird month to say the least. It's been a difficult, sort of strange month, separate to my reading life just in general, and I had times where I didn't pick up a book for 5 days straight, but then I read tons at the weekends. So basically you won't see much of a difference in my stack of books. Like, I read a fair amount, but I know that there were definitely, like I said, these blocks of days where I didn't read at all and I felt like I was in a reading slump. So it's been very strange, but as I said, I am very happy with what I am able to talk to you guys about today, because although it was a struggle, I have managed to get through a fair amount of books. And actually, yeah, let's start with some stats about how many books I managed to read. So I will actually say that I am filming this on Saturday the 29th of May, so there are still 2 days left. I am in the middle of reading 2 books, and I do expect to have finished both of those by the time the month finishes. So I'm going to count those in my stats. I don't have time to film this video sort of before it needs to go up, but after the month finishes. So I'm just going to do it today, count them in the stats, and then insert clips here, because I'll have time just to film quick thoughts on those hopefully on Monday. And yes, but we are going to assume that I have read them for these purposes. So I read a total of 10 books during the month of May, which means that I have now read 54 books for the entire year, which means that I have actually hit my Goodreads reading challenge. So I set my Goodreads reading challenge at the same thing every single year. It's 52 books, which is a book a week. I am aiming for 100 books this year, and I'm definitely on track for that now. But yes, it was nice to sort of hit that, because there's been times where I don't hit that reading goal at all. There's times where I hit it sort of in November. So it's nice to have hit it in May, definitely. And especially because I read quite a lot last year, but I wasn't working for part of last year. Obviously there was lockdowns and things like that. I've solidly been working this year, and I've still managed to keep up my reading. Obviously social aspects maybe haven't been as much, but it is still nice to see that I am prioritising reading so far this year, and hopefully I'll carry on like that throughout the year as well. I'll just make time for it with other plans that might happen. I'm actually surprised by these next stats, because I thought that there was going to be a dip in page numbers. When I checked these last week, I was actually sort of just managing to do my 100 pages a day that I aim for every month. But somehow over the last, well actually it's over the last 2 days really, because like I said, I'm in the middle of 2 books that I will finish before then, and those have definitely bumped up my numbers. So I've now read 3,877 pages for the month, and that is an average of 125 pages per day, which is about on par with what I did last month. So I'm very happy with that. It means that for the year to date, I have read 20,500 pages, and I am averaging about 135 pages per day. So it's definitely dipped a little bit. I definitely had a higher month earlier on. I think it was March was a really good reading month for me. But I like that it's consistent, and also if you've watched my TBR at all, you'll know that I have ambitious plans for June and reading as much as I can for Whatever You Want-a-thon, so hopefully I'll be able to bump that page count up anyway during the next month. Right, enough of the stats. I've been filming for a while now, and I don't know how much of that's actually been kept in, but let's actually go on to talking about the books. Let's tell you my thoughts and feelings on each of the books that I read this month. So the first book that I read this month was an arc of If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich. This one, I have got a full sort of weekend reading vlog. I believe it was a readathon vlog where I gave a little bit more thoughts as I was reading it. But basically it tells the story of 2 boys who are in a boy band together, and they start a romantic relationship, and it's just about them two getting together and how that's sort of dealt with by themselves being in the public eye and also by the sort of team around them and whether or not they're allowed to talk about a lot of these things. I really liked this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was fun, it was cute, it also did have some more sort of harder hitting moments. I will say that one of the issues that I had with it was that some of those more harder hitting moments were kind of touched on but then not really explored, where I think it could have been fleshed out a bit more. It was a fairly short book and I think it could have got away with being a bit longer. I don't think it would have made it drag if you just fleshed out those bits a little bit more. But in general, I really liked it. It was a writing duo, and a lot of the times when you have 2 people writing a book, I find that I prefer one person's writing style more than the other. And I didn't really get that with this. It was very cohesive, although the characters did have very distinct voices. I have read stuff from Sophie Gonzalez before. I haven't read anything from Cale Dietrich, but I think I might in the future. I think I said in the reading vlog, it's not my favourite Sophie Gonzalez book. That's probably perfect on paper, but I did very much enjoy it. I actually haven't read anything by her that I haven't liked so far. So it comes out in December. I believe it's a fair while off, but I do recommend you pick it up when it comes out if that sounds like something you might be interested in. And the next book that I read this month was Wind Witch by Susan Dennard. So if you watched my last month wrap up, you will see that I read Truth Witch and didn't particularly love it. I was reading this to participate in the Witchlands Long, which has been hosted by Jade from JD Ray Reads, where she's reading the entire Witchlands series in build up for the latest book coming out. I can't remember what that one's called, but there is a new one coming out either next month or the month after. I'm going to give up on this read of this series after this book. The first one I found just quite confusing. It threw you in at the deep end and didn't really explain very much. This one definitely was an easier read, but I just found that I didn't really care, although I could definitely follow along with it more, and there were some sort of relationships and things that were being developed that I found more interesting. I just didn't, like I said, didn't care. Not enough to carry on reading anyway. Just a brief synopsis actually. So this is in a world where there are lots of different types of magic. So the first one is Truth Witch, and the main character of that one is somebody who can tell if you are telling the truth when you speak. A Wind Witch controls the weather. There are various other types of witches as well. It kind of starts off when Safi, the Truth Witch, ends up getting hunted by a Blood Witch, who is someone who can track people through their power and through their blood. And it's all centred around the end of this political treaty, and all the characters kind of get pulled into that for some reason. I am not giving the best description of this. I read this right at the beginning of the month. I didn't really like it, and I've kind of put it from my mind since. Like I said, I don't plan on finishing this series. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay, but it's just not for me. There's just something about it that I don't enjoy. Now, the next book that I read is probably the book that took me the longest to read this month. Not because I didn't enjoy it, although enjoy it probably isn't the right word, but just because it was a fairly difficult read. And that is Docile by K.M. Sbarra. So I read this one for the Burned Books Club. It is their pick for May/June, I believe. So I've read it a bit early, but it's because I have other reading plans for June, so I just wanted to make sure I definitely read it. I also did know it might take a while to read because it deals with some fairly heavy topics. So it's set in a world where all debt is familial, so it's passed down through generations, and basically if the debt gets too much, you can sell yourself into servitude and become something called a docile. So a docile is basically bought to be a slave. They can be bought for various different reasons, but you get some choice in who it is that you sell yourself to, and also you do get the option to take a medication called Dosaline, which basically makes you forget everything that's happening and kind of takes away your free will for anything that you are doing. Not that you really have free will, because you are selling yourself into this servitude. The main character in this, Elisha, decides to sell himself to be a docile in order to pay off his family's debt, but he refuses to take the Dosaline because he's seen it have bad effects on his mother before him. So basically what that means is that he is a witness to everything that is happening to him, and there are lots of depictions of Well, actually, I'm just going to read the trigger warnings from the back, which says that Docile contains forthright depictions and discussions of rape, abuse, and other consent violations, as well as attempted suicide and suicidal ideation. He's basically personal Docile to someone called Alex, and that does involve various different tasks, including basically being a sex slave, and there are some very graphic depictions of what happens in this. It's a hard one to describe. I can't say that I enjoyed this book because, like I said, it was very difficult to read. I couldn't put it down though. So while I didn't enjoy the reading experience, I was captivated, I think is the best way to put it. I don't really have coherent thoughts on it. I think there was a lot of interesting discussions in here about consent. I am not sure how I feel about the ending of it and kind of where some of the characters were left. But I don't want to go too much into spoilers because I think if you're going to read this book, I wouldn't know too much going into it apart from the trigger warnings. Please, please, please look at the trigger warnings because it's definitely difficult and I can definitely imagine this being fairly triggering for some people. So be very, very aware if you're planning on reading it. But if you think you are in a place to read it, if it's something that sounds interesting to you, I do recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. It's a very high 4 stars, but yeah, 4 stars. There were some issues with it. But yeah, I think that's all I can really say about this one. Sorry, it's not the most coherent wrap-up for this particular book. And the next book, I don't think I need to say too much about. It's Heartstopper Volume 4 by Alice Oseman. Of course, this one got 5 stars. I don't think I need to tell you that. I've done a whole video on how much I love Alice Oseman, and I think I gushed about Heartstopper in that. I've gushed about Heartstopper a few other times. I love this series. It tells the story of Nick and Charlie, and they are 2 boys at a sort of secondary school in the UK. They end up in the same form, they become friends, it ends up being a romance. This volume in particular has got a lot more serious, I would say. The first couple of volumes is just about them getting together, and then in the third one we start to introduce more of Charlie's mental health struggles. This one very much deals with that. The trigger warnings for eating disorders as well as talk of self-harm. Nothing is particularly graphic. It's not skirted around, but it's also not depicted on page, if that makes sense. A lot of it is done in diary entries where it's kind of after the event, and both of the characters are talking about how they got through that time period. But it is, this is a book that does sort of feature Charlie really struggling with that. If any of you have read Solitaire, which is the book that these characters first started in, this story crosses over with Solitaire. So there are a few things that happen in that book to do with Charlie and his mental health that are the things that are kind of discussed after the event in this one. That being said, it's still adorable, as well as having all those sort of more intense moments. This is also the book that features them two really sort of growing into their relationship, and it ends with a really sort of cute, hopeful note as well. It's actually the penultimate book in the series. There's only going to be 5 volumes, so we've not got much left, and that makes me very upset. But no, I really enjoyed this. How long until I reread this is the question, because generally I reread this series about 2 or 3 times a year. You might see this in the next wrap up as well. The next book I read also featured in some sort of vlog that I did. I can't remember which one, but that is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. This tells the story of 2 twins. It starts in the 1960s, and they are growing up in a town that essentially is created for mixed race people in sort of the American South. And the idea is, and it's an awful idea, but the idea is that each generation should be lighter skinned than the previous generation. And the sort of catalyst for this story is that both of these girls run away from this town, and then they lose touch with each other and live very different lives. So one of the twins ends up marrying a dark-skinned black man, and she has a dark-skinned black daughter, and ends up coming back to the town with that daughter, and is kind of looked down upon because, like I said, in this town lightness is seen as being better. Again, many things wrong with that statement. And The other twin, she decides to pass as white. Nobody in her life knows that she's mixed race, and she's kind of having to, or choosing to, go along with a lot of the racism that was and still is apparent in the world. And it's just a sort of exploration of that and kind of the different ways that life can treat people depending based on colorism, essentially. Because then it also sort of goes off to how each of their daughters' lives are affected as well, because they both obviously have very different lives as well, and they end up interacting at some point, and that's kind of where it all comes back together. It was a very interesting book. I did very much enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. My only sort of issues with it were not really issues, it was just to do with personal preferences. So this book generally, like I said, it starts in the 60s, but it does span sort of a length of time, so it comes more modern day by the end of it. I am not generally a fan of books where it's just very fleeting snippets of someone's life throughout the years. I would prefer to sort of follow a more set time period, and rather than sort of, this felt like just like tiny vignettes from different time periods instead. And yeah, I just felt like I would have liked to have had sections of that more fleshed out. But like I said, I think that's more to do with my personal reading tastes. It is quite short, so kind of like I was saying before with another book, it could have been added to and it wouldn't have felt like it was too much because there's plenty of space to add more to it. But I did very much enjoy it. I think the conversations that were had in here were very important, and I do understand why it's got some very, very good reviews. It's just maybe not my particular type of book, although for this type of book I very, very much liked it. The next book that I read was House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. So this is about 3 sisters who all went missing for a good chunk of time. I can't remember how long it was, but basically when they came back, they were all changed. Their hair colour had changed, their eye colour had changed, and they had this scar on the base of their neck, and none of them remembered what had happened to them. But since then, sort of weird things have been happening around them, and many years later, one of the sisters goes missing again, and the other 2 have to figure out what happened and how that links to what happened to them all those years ago. It's fairly creepy. There's some like slightly disturbing imagery in here. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I liked the build up to it, but I felt like the payoff at the end wasn't that great. It was, yeah, like the atmosphere was really good, but then how it actually concluded with sort of finding out the mystery and things like that, I felt like it was fairly predictable. I enjoyed it, but I just didn't love it. Nothing really too negative to say about it. It was okay. The next book that I read was actually a non-fiction, which I don't tend to read a lot of, and that was The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. So I actually read this and listened to the audiobook as well, and I particularly chose that method because this started life as a podcast. So John Green has a podcast called The Anthropocene Reviewed, where he reviews, how does he say it? Essays on a human-centered planet. So he reviews various facets of life on a 5-star scale. So there are very random things that he's reviewing in here. So if I just have a look at the contents page, the first one is You'll Never Walk Alone, which is a song from Carousel that is sung by Liverpool Football Club as one of their chants. And then the second one is Humanity's Temporal Range. So it's about how humans can't envision how old the universe is because we are sort of in this smaller, because we think of like our lives as being long and we can't think of how long the actual universe has been in comparison to that. It gets deep. It was a very good book. I gave this one 5 stars. So it's kind of a mixture between these essays and reviews, but also a memoir. A lot of the stuff in here is actually stories from John Green's own life, and particularly to do with his struggles with things like OCD and anxiety. There's talk about sort of how he was bullied at school. It's a lot actually about sort of this past year and the feelings of isolation that most of us have felt. And it was a very good read. It's hard to kind of review it almost, even though it is a book that is all about reviews, because it's a very I found it to be a very sort of like personal experience in reading it. There were times I cried when I was reading it. There's times I've cried plenty of times listening to that podcast though as well. I connect a lot with John Green's writing anyway, and I just found that some of the thoughts and like feelings that you were left with from this were exactly what I needed at that point in time, and also some of them probably weren't what I needed because they made me more terrified, but it definitely left me with a feeling of sort of hope at the end of it. Actually, there's a lot of quotes in this book, and one of the poems that John Green tends to quote a fair amount is one by Emily Dickinson. I'm actually just going to read it because I think this is kind of what I was left with at the end of the book, and it says, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings a tune without words and never stops at all." And I don't know why, I really love that, and I think that kind of sums up my feelings at the end of this book as well. And this is where we had 2 5-star reads in a row, because the next one was a reread that has gone from a 4-star read last time to a 5-star, as did its predecessor last month, and that is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. So yeah, I reread Strange to Dreamer last month. I've reread Muse of Nightmares this month as part of the Strange Along, which has been hosted by Maddie from Book Browsing Blog. And I adored this book. I actually really loved it more than the last time I read it. The last time, I think what had happened is I'd read Strange about a year before, then had to wait for Muse to come out, and didn't reread Strange before reading Muse, so I think I was a little bit, I'd forgot things that had happened. And also Muse is a very different story from Strange. It's got a different, so the pacing's a lot different. It's definitely quicker, and I think that I didn't really know to expect that last time. So I still enjoyed it last time, but I gave it 4 stars, whereas this time I gave it 5. And I think as well, like, I really appreciate Laini Taylor's writing so much more now, having read many of her books this year. Like literally everything on this shelf behind me I have read this year. So yeah, I can't really give you a synopsis without spoiling Strange the Dreamer, but Strange tells the story of Laszlo, who basically has always been obsessed with the lost city of Weep, which is a city that kind of everyone suddenly just one day forgot the name of, and nobody has heard from anyone from that city for many years, and suddenly he gets the opportunity to go there, and it's about what happens on that journey. I'm not going to say anything else because the less you know about this series, the better. And there was a discussion actually on the Strange Along about how some people give a synopsis that's literally up to like page 300, and you don't need that. You don't need to know anything else. I really hope that she writes something else in this universe at some point, because I think she definitely could. And I mean, to be honest, I want to pick up anything that she writes, but yeah, I'm really happy that this is now a 5-star read. And like I said, I am reading 2 other books at the minute. I will insert clips here of full thoughts, but just to let you know what I am reading currently, it is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland, and I'm about 100 pages into this. Yeah, 90 pages in, and I think it's just under 300 pages, so I should get this finished in the next couple of days. I'm liking it so far. I'm not going to give you the synopsis now. I'm going to insert a clip here with synopsis and thoughts, because I can't really give you a synopsis at the minute because it's just explaining what's happening right now. But yeah, insert a clip here and tell you my thoughts. So it's now Monday the 31st of May. I finished last night actually In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. So I basically read the majority of this one all day yesterday in the sort of last 2 sets of sprints for Do the Fingerthon that Ashley was hosting. I actually sort of used Do the Fingerthon to read arcs because both The Lucky Escape and this one I had as an arc. Obviously I do now have a finished copy of this one. It's done with the beautiful edges. I enjoyed this one. It was, I think at the end of it, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would about halfway through. It's basically about a world where there is blood magic, and that is passed on through generations. It's actually represented on the skin, so there's markings that go across all the skin, and that's passed down from generation to generation. Basically the main character is an heir to a bloodline, but she's been hiding that for many years, and then something happens that kind of exposes that to the world, and she ends up, everyone who has blood magic in this world gets bound to basically a guardian who is essentially a ghost, and it is about, yeah, what happens when she's thrown into sort of the politics of the world that all go around the magic. And also then it is a very queer book. So the main character is pansexual. There is also a non-binary character in here. There's a lesbian character in here. There's talk of a sexual rep. There's polyamory as well, so there is a consensual male female relationship. It's an interesting book, I will say. The representation was great. The characters were really fun. The main character's really snarky and she just doesn't take attitude from anyone, which is really fun to read. And Jaffa, the non-binary character in this, was just a really lovely character to read about. They are exactly the sort of friend that you would want to have in your life. They were just a really great character. And yeah, I think, like I said, I enjoyed the characters. I found that the magic system got a little bit convoluted at times, but it was a really fun read. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and yeah, I mean, I always think it's a good thing if I manage to power through a book mostly in one day. It must mean that there's something in it that's keeping me entertained. So I'm glad that I read this one. And now I will pass you back to Chloe from the past. And then the last book that I am reading at the minute is The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. This comes out in a couple of weeks. I have an arc for it. I actually have the audiobook, so I'm listening to that. And it's basically a adult romance about a character called Annie who is left at the altar. And not long after that, she ends up bumping into someone that she used to know when she was a teenager. She gets the offer to still go on the honeymoon because her would-be in-laws say, here you go, take it anyway, we apologise that our son left you. So she decides to go on this holiday to Australia with the guy that she used to go to summer camp with when she was younger, and I'm going to guess that there's going to be a romance. I'm about halfway through and there's definitely flirtations and things at the minute, but there hasn't been actual romance yet. But I'm just waiting for that to happen, and so far I'm really enjoying it. I will again insert a clip here just giving you my final thoughts. And I have finished reading The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. I gave this one 4 stars. It's kind of like a 3.5 to a 4. It was really good. It was just a fun sort of summery contemporary romance, which is exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted something, I was reading a fantasy and I wanted something else I could kind of dive into that would give me a little bit of break from that. Basically, it tells, I think I've already done a synopsis, but it tells the story of a girl who is sort of left at the altar, and then she gets to still go on the honeymoon with this guy that she used to know when she was younger, and then a romance ensues. I found it to be, like I said, really fun, really enjoyable. The only sort of issues I had with it really is that it was a lot more enjoyable whilst they were on the honeymoon, and as soon as that finished, they extended it a little bit too much drama of sort of, will it work once they get back home? Some of it just got a little bit too melodramatic. It was still fun, it was still enjoyable. I mean, it's kind of what you expect going into that type of book, so I didn't have too many issues with it. I've read one book previously from this author, which was Heartstopper, and I think I still prefer that one. But in general, I do enjoy her writing just for when I want something really easy to read. So yeah, also the other thing to note actually is that I listened to the audiobook of this. I also listened to the audiobook when I first read Heartstopper. They were both narrated by Carrie Hope Fletcher, and I think that really helped add to my enjoyment as well, because I'm a big fan of Carrie Hope Fletcher in general. And I found that this one in particular was quite fun because it got to show off her acting abilities a little bit more. I've seen her act sort of on stage quite a few times, and it's always nice when you get to see her sort of stretch her skills a little bit more. There was a lot of accents in this one, which was fun to listen to. So yeah, really good, just if you want something quick and easy to read. So yeah, this is my nice big stack of books that I read this month. Like I said, I really did not expect to actually read this much. Like, there were times where I just, like, literally until last night I'd not picked up a book in 5 days. But now we're reading, so it's going okay. Hopefully this will carry on through the month of June. I am going to basically just shut up and leave you to it now because I feel like I've talked a lot. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Tell me how your reading month went during May. I forgot what month it was then. I've been talking about it throughout the entire video, but I forgot what month it is. But yeah, tell me how your reading month went. Tell me what your favourite book is. Actually, normally that's something I do. So I'm actually not going to do what I normally do and pick a favourite and least favourite book of the month, because this month has been anything but normal and I can't really put coherent thoughts into picking that right now. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time with my May haul so you can see what I've been buying this month as well. Thanks, bye.